Welcome to the MindBodyCouple podcast.
I'm Tanner Murtaugh.
And I'm Ann Hampson.
This podcast is dedicated to helping you unlearn chronic pain and symptoms.
If you need support with your healing, you can book in for a consultation with one of our therapists at painpsychotherapy.ca.
Or purchase our online course at embodicommunity.com to access in-depth education, somatic practices, recovery tools, and an interactive community focused on healing. Links in the description of each episode. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome back. We have an interesting episode for you all today.
Yeah, we do. We wanted to talk about kind of lessons Tanner's learned, but I've learned as well, about mind-body healing from our experience of the stomach flu.
Yes. So to give context, this story of when our family, and I mean our whole family, got the stomach flu was, I think, about 10 months ago.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's ingrained. It's, like, in my mind. I will never forget.
Yeah, and, you know, anyone who's a parent out there, you know, when I was single, or even with Anne, but didn't have kids, I used to think, you know, getting sick, that really sucks.
Right.
And then when you have kids, you're like, whoa, this really sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it sucks on a whole nother level.
Yeah, it's awful. And the stomach flu is right up there as probably the worst.
Well, and like, so we talk about the stomach flu like as vomiting. And hopefully we're not grossing anyone out as we share these stories. But I had never experienced the stomach flu like this, like ever in my life. This was the first time of experiencing
this
what
level.
We're trying to describe. Yeah.
So what happened, and this is important for the lessons I learned, but what happened is my daughter got sick first. And the way this stomach flu...
Did she get sick first?
She did.
Yeah.
And the way this presented was completely fine. Within 20 minutes of starting to feel ill, vomiting profusely. Like, it was, like, real quick. And so my daughter got it first.
Wait. We have to explain all of the pieces here, though. When our kids vomit, Tanner struggles. And I think maybe listeners out there relate to this. And so it's on me. I'm holding them. They're vomiting on me. They're sitting on me vomiting. I feel like throughout our stories, I have to share.
You got to share
these parts of it. Tanner.
I have a real, and this is important for the story. Like, when someone's throwing up around me, like if I'm too close, I start to gag. Like, it's like an instant response. It's not great. So I'm not proud of this fact. But daughter got sick.
Yeah.
Then my son got sick.
Yes.
Like a few days later.
Just goes to the house.
And then a few days later, Anne got sick.
Of course, right? Because I'm like sacrificing myself as they vomit on me. This happens all the time. But yeah. And when I got sick, I was like...
You were down and out.
I was basically... I remember I texted you in the night and I was like... I vomited like 14 times at this point. I can't leave the room. I can't do anything. I cannot work or tend to the kids or do anything. You must do it all. Like, it was like this, like, I'm going to die text to Tanner.
Yeah, I woke up early morning, got this text. I was like, okay, I'm on it. And then a few days after that, I got sick. So I just went right through the entire house. And... you know, I had a bit of a regression in terms of, like, my mind-body techniques around this period.
Well, what happened to you when you started seeing all of us get sick? What was happening to you?
It's like my terror grew. Like, each family member that fell, like, my terror was growing. And this is the first lesson that I learned, is fear is the driver for chronic symptoms.
Now, one thing I want to say, as you, like, witnessed all of this with us, I think your fear was valid. You knew it was coming for you eventually.
Yeah. But it was growing. And the pattern of illness that happened with all of us
Yeah.
was you instantly felt bad and then you were vomiting.
Yes.
But what happened to me is after our son got sick, so second family member that fell down, I started to experience nausea.
Yeah. So, and I remember, Tanner would be like, "Hey, I'm getting sick. It's happening. I'm feeling the nausea." And I remember you're in this like panic, frozen mixture state.
Oh yeah, it was like a frozen shutdown, terror state of impending doom. And I'm talking, I got nausea 5 days before I eventually got ill.
And were you truly feeling the nausea?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like it was through and through. It was neuroplastic nausea.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Now, eventually I did get sick, unfortunately, but
it wasn't the same pattern.
And I knew because I would go and, I'd get real deep into the fear. And anyone who's had chronic pain, chronic symptoms that are neuroplastic, they get it. Like the more the fear grows, the more the symptoms grow.
And I remember seeing that. Like I was like, I was even pointing it out. I was like, Tanner, you're really fearing this. You don't seem like sick yet.
Yeah.
And I was trying to like calm the fear. So I knew what was happening.
And it worked briefly. I remember he did that a few times and the nausea would completely go away. And I'd be like, oh, I'm fine. Or I'd go and do my yoga and my nausea would completely go away.
I remember that too. And you're like, the nausea doesn't seem to be there when I'm doing yoga. And I was like,
Yeah. Yeah, you just... You're a little smug about it. You were like, you were so sick at that point.
I was like dying. And Tanner's like, I'm nauseous. And I was like, I thought I had to go to the hospital because I was vomiting so much. But to be fair, that nausea you were feeling very much was real. And I think that anticipatory fear that you had was so strong. Yeah. And that was really hard. So every time we were trying to like, intervene there, it was really hard to intervene because there was that anticipatory fear and then the feeling of nausea.
And it was real, and I want to be clear, it was really intense.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, oh, my stomach's a little queasy. Yeah. It was like, I would be like waiting in the bathroom.
Yes,
thinking it was coming.
I remember that.
And that's the thing about neuroplastic symptoms that sometimes people don't believe is the severity, like how extreme they can be.
And I want to apologize for that, Tanner, because I know at the time, and even now, we're joking about it, but I wasn't since I had been so sick, I was like, oh, Tanner, and I kind of fell into maybe blowing your experience off a little bit.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but I also know that at the time, none of us were our best selves.
No.
Like, we had been trapped in this house with kids, ill kids for a week.
Yes.
We're trying to juggle work.
Oh, yeah.
Like
it was dark.
And this is one of the downfalls I always tell people of running our own companies.
Yeah.
It comes with lots of benefits.
Right.
But it comes with a lot of pressure of like, if I don't work, I don't make money.
Right.
And so like whenever, and that was part of, I think, the thing that was driving the fear for me.
Interesting. So there's other factors.
There was other factors of like, Anne can't work for a week, like what do I do? And it's a bit needless, but that's what was building the fear even more of like, what if I'm off work for a week? What are the consequences? Like it was all of it. It was just building.
And I think it's important to recognize that because sometimes like there's fear about our sensation. So maybe fear about the nausea of like, oh my God, I'm getting sick. But then there's also other fears about maybe like you're talking about work and money and all that contributing to the sensation growing. And so it's not always fear of the sensation, it's fear in general.
Yeah, of what the sensation is going to mean for our life. And anyone who's had chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic dizziness, other symptoms, we have that fear of like, it's not just that we fear the symptom, because we do, and we fear it. It's unpleasant. We don't want it to be there.
Yeah.
But we also fear, like, what's that going to mean for our life, our greater life?
Well, and it's important to look at that. Is like, okay, what does fear look like in my life and my day-to-day, and how much is that impacting pain and symptoms?
And I think it was such an important learning for myself, because I've been out of debilitating chronic pain for a long time. And this was like it felt like a new experience of, oh yeah, like fear can create these intense, prolonged symptoms.
Well, and what does that kind of tell you, Tanner, of like being out of chronic pain for such a long time, and then this experience maybe with different types of pain sensation come on for you?
Well, I think what I tell people is, and this is why maintaining the work is so key. I had a bit of a stumbling here,
Right.
But it was only brief. And when we have like a strong mind-body connection, we are more prone to these things.
Yes.
That's just known. I know most people don't want to hear that.
Right. It's like, can I cure it forever and never experience anything like that again?
And this was temporary. Like I had some nausea for 2 or 3 days. It's not like it ruined my year or anything.
Right.
And part of that is because I maintained the healing and I caught the pattern pretty early on. Partly with your help, but I caught the pattern pretty early on. And I think that's the other key ingredient here of why we need to maintain doing some of this work, because when we have a strong mind-body connection, our brains are just so suggestible.
Well, and something that, and this isn't 100% the same, but sometimes I'll hear from people that they've had an injury here, and then the next year they had an illness, and next year they had something else, and then something else, and it always kind of prolongs symptoms. And this is an example, maybe, if you hadn't been maintaining work, Tanner, or didn't know about mind-body approach, then maybe symptoms for this would have lingered too. And I think this is how we can get multiple mind-body sensations throughout a lifetime in some way, is our reaction.
People almost get these like serial neuroplastic symptoms where they heal one thing, and then it's like on to the next for a couple of years, which I empathize with anyone because I totally get how easily it is. But this is my first lesson. Second lesson I learned.
So you were in fear.
Yeah. Second lesson, obsessing equals suffering.
So what was your obsessing looking like?
Oh, it got out of control. You're laughing because you remember this period.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I just know you can be very obsessive. So I am like imagining like the intensity of your obsession.
I have some obsessive-compulsive tendencies. They've been reduced greatly over the years, but I can snap into them quick. And this one, it felt like there was like impending danger. Every time another family member got ill.
I'm so sorry. I can imagine you watching this.
You know, it may suck to be the first one who got sick, but to be the last one, it's just like you're watching dominoes fall and you know you're at the end of the line. Like, it's not great. And so my obsessing got out of control.
And so what did that look like? What was the form it was taking?
There was the constant thinking. Like, I don't think I thought of anything but that all week.
And what were you trying to do with the thinking? Were you trying to like
It's like I was trying to figure it out and fix it in my mind. Like my obsessing almost becomes like I'm fixated on these intrusive thoughts of like I'm gonna get sick. But then I'm obsessing in my mind thinking like, how do I problem solve my way out of this?
Right.
And as a result, that's the obsessive part, but I have a bit of OCD. The compulsive behaviors was, you know, like distancing myself, like washing my hands perpetually. Like my hands were bleeding.
I remember. And I remember the distance and I was angry at you.
I know you're
because I was like, I'm dying, or I almost died with my illness, and now I'm taking care of my kids. I was so
pretty fair. After you got ill, though, I took over. Do you not remember this?
Yeah, because I couldn't leave the bathroom. You had to take over.
Give myself some credit.
Okay. I just don't paint that. You're painting a certain picture.
This is how the last domino fell. His aunt got ill, and I knew at that point. I'm like, I'm sunk. It's over.
Yes.
But the obsessing, like. Constantly hand washing, constantly washing where I'm sitting. Like it was like, but it took on a life of its own.
Well, and it's interesting because obviously we know hand washing and sanitizing and distancing is important for health, obviously. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but we can get so fearful that can become an obsessive loop.
Yeah, and with any neuroplastic symptom, it's so easy to get into this obsessive-compulsive patterns because we're obsessing thinking that that's useful. Like we're obsessing thinking that like we can problem solve this, we can fix this, we can figure it out. So we obsess 80% of the day, and then you have all these compulsive behaviors.
Well, and
right?
it's like, okay, I must do this. And then the intensity increases because the fear is increasing. So it's like, I'm just going to wash more or I'm going to do this more, which also increases the fear.
And my lesson here was these obsessive compulsive patterns just equaled suffering. And I want to be clear, I did get very sick at the end of this. All the fear and obsessing was worse. Through
that's
and through.
interesting.
Like, I know I'm speaking for myself personally here.
To be fair, Tanner, you didn't get that sick.
I was pretty ill. Don't invalidate
You were
me.
not as sick as the rest of us. He was sick, yeah.
You're invalidating
not as much.
my experience.
I'm sorry.
And it's publicized.
I'm sorry.
But it was like all the fear and obsessing and compulsive behaviors, they were worse in the long run than the actual symptoms I got in the end.
Well, and I think that's a really good realization to have of like, okay, and not that pain and symptoms aren't bad, but in your story, at least right now, was it that bad?
Yeah.
And like, but I was fearing it so much.
Yeah, and you know, I understand people listening. Some of you have really intense symptoms.
And we don't want to diminish
And I'm not
that.
saying that those aren't really hard, because they are. I remember having debilitating widespread pain.
Yeah.
But the amount of obsessing and fear that I have was escalating the suffering in a huge way. And it was perpetuated forward, because the more I obsessed and did these compulsive actions, I just perpetually felt nauseous at a high level for 4 days. Right. Before I actually got sick.
Well, and so it's understanding that, and that can be really hard. And trying to step out of obsession when our brain is telling us, no, we need to obsess, can feel really difficult.
Mm-hmm. That's the second lesson. Lesson number 3.
Yeah.
Radically accepting and allowing symptoms is key. Radical acceptance.
Yes.
There is probably not many psychological concepts that are more hated than radical acceptance.
Really? I quite like radical acceptance.
I know you. Anne has a deep love with radical acceptance.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
I just think you're really, I think, and for good reason.
I feel like you might be insulting me.
I'm not insulting you here. I wish I had this, because like, me getting to radical acceptance is exactly what I described already. I get incredibly fearful.
It's like incredibly painful to get there.
I have obsessive compulsive patterns. And finally, I radically accept. Anne's like, oh, this is terrible. I'll radically accept this. Like, it's like so quick.
Well, I
it's
find
great.
radical acceptance very useful, because then if you stop the fight, it actually makes things much easier.
Yes.
Which I guess is what you're saying here.
And I've learned this so many times, and it's still like I'm just clawing my way towards radical acceptance. Like, it really... But once I became ill, there was only one thing to do.
Yes.
And I remember, you know, because you were back at work at this point.
Yeah.
And the kids were back at school or day home, or I don't know where they were. So I was really ill at this point.
Better off to know where they are.
Yeah, it's fair. And I'm like laid back in my chair, just feeling awful.
Yeah.
And that's where I came to radical acceptance.
And what did that look like for you when you felt like, okay, I am working?
It was like this. I didn't do it once in the day and a half I was really ill. Like, it was constant of like. Because, like, there's this pull of, like, I feel terrible inside. I'm going to do everything I can to avoid this. Like, check out, run away.
Right.
And radical acceptance is, like, you're stopping the running away. You're stopping the fight, as you just stated. And you're truly just, you don't have to approve of it, but you're radically accepting this is what it is, and I'm going to be with this experience.
Yeah.
And I sat with it. I kept bringing myself of like, I'm not going to fight this anymore. I fought for 4 days being fearful and obsessive, only to get ill in the end. And I'm done fighting. And so there was like a real deep radical acceptance and allowing of what was taking place.
And even though you felt so bad, Tanner, what do you think that did for your nervous system?
It supported it. Like, it took away a lot of the sympathetic activation.
Yeah.
Like it just diminished a lot of that. And as a result, I started to feel better and things started to fade.
Yeah.
And so, radically accepting and allowing our chronic pain, chronic symptoms is really difficult. But every single person I've seen heal has done this at some point in their journey.
Yes.
You cannot skip this step.
Well, and then hopefully it's important to start realizing, hey, actually, this is useful. I think we fight radical acceptance so much because we think, oh, we can think we're giving up.
Exactly.
We can think, but it's actually the opposite. We're just kind of stopping the parts of the fight that isn't helpful.
I know our producer, Alex Klassen, he often talks about trying to sell people on radical acceptance. He tells people, like, this is an actionable step.
Yes.
And I think that's so important to understand because people think I'm giving up, and if I radically accept, I'll never get better because I'm just throwing in the towel. It is one of the first important steps people need to be making. It might take a long time to get there, but it's one of the vital early on steps that's going to make the rest of the work possible.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm no longer trying to get rid of this. I'm no longer fighting against it. I'm just going to accept and allow it's here. And then I'm going to use all the mind-body techniques I've learned to cultivate as much safety as possible.
Well, and when I'm talking with people about pain flares, which I think when, your sickness was
it's kind of like a flare.
Kind of like a flare. When the pain is so high, radical acceptance is so important at that time.
Yeah. And we're not saying that you need to intensely focus on your horrible pain flare for 8 hours. But there needs to be this acceptance of, I'm having this flare right now.
Yeah.
I'll do the best I can to create safety, but I'm not going to do everything to try and force this to go away.
Totally. And I'm not going to kind of white knuckle and push through it either. Yeah. So it's an acceptance that this is kind of where things are at right now. But also the belief that it will pass. Did you believe when you were sick that it was going to pass?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess you saw it pass for all of us.
Yeah, and it was, and I think that's the difference here I want to be clear about. Compared to our chronic pain or illness, there can be a lot more what ifs of what if this never goes away.
Well, and I know for some people, it doesn't always pass in the sense of a pain flare passes. And so that can be a bit difficult to believe.
Where I knew that this, no matter what I do, it's going to come back down.
Yeah.
But I can promise if I stayed in fear and obsessing, I would have had nausea long past the period of actually being ill. And so that was the third lesson. Now the fourth and final lesson.
Yes.
Feel, feel, feel.
So you're saying feel the illness that you had at full force?
I'm saying feel the illness, like when it was tolerable, but I'm more talking about feel the emotions and dysregulation about the symptoms you've had.
Okay.
About the experience.
So allow the emotions, so the frustration you had, maybe the fears you had around work, maybe the overwhelm.
Because after 24 hours, I got better. But there was a lot of, I was just living in survival mode for a week.
Yeah.
And there was a lot to process. There was a lot to sit with to help my body kind of move through. And so I think sometimes people forget this is when you have a pain or symptom flare, your system's kind of in survival mode.
Yes.
And so after a period of high symptoms, we often need space to feel our emotions, to feel our nervous system state. This is a very vital part of the healing, and now I think people should be doing this every day, if I'm really honest. Feeling emotions, feeling nervous system state. But especially after overwhelming situations, whether they're pain flares or not, like it could be any overwhelming situation, we need a lot of space and slowness to reconnect with our body and help things move through.
Well, and that's why it's important sometimes when we're like, okay, I had a pain flare or I had a stressful situation. Now it's gone. Then I just move on. Well, then we're always kind of just pushing through. We need to kind of slow down and listen to the system and listen to our bodies, like you're saying.
Exactly. And we have lots of content in past episodes on feeling emotions, nervous system. Last episode, we just did it on shame, actually.
Yeah.
Then I have lots of free practices on YouTube. And if people want a more in-depth, like our digital course has lots on
Yes.
feeling emotions, feeling nervous system state, how to move through that, lots of practices in there. But this is a vital step. And so this was our episode
Yeah.
on, lessons I learned about mind-body healing from the stomach flu.
Well, and I think it's an interesting way of looking at things. And we hope, as you guys were listening, that you found it a helpful way to kind of look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, Tanner's stomach flu is, of course, not comparable to anyone's experience of pain.
Yeah.
But we wanted to kind of use this kind of as an example of how the mind can be so influential. Because I think you definitely experienced that.
And even for people that have already recovered or have gone a long way in their journey, I want to showcase, with my own example of how easily we can slip back into having this relationship with symptoms in our body.
Well, and when I think of radical acceptance, that's an important thing to radically accept too. That, okay, once in a while, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for listening.
We'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. For more free content, check out the links for our YouTube channel, Instagram, and Facebook accounts in the episode description.
We wish you all healing.